Here we are then, Dimp Digital's official Destiny 2 review. You've got myself, Apps, here, and I'm joined by Mr. Destiny himself. It's Sir Dave.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good, thank you.
Excellent. So, we've actually spoken about this quite a bit prior to release because there were various betas floating about that have been available. I think it's safe to kind of not gloss over, but just to say that the mechanics, shooting mechanics in particular, are superb, aren't they? Really,
Yep.
in short, without spending 5 minutes going into the intricacies of it, it's an excellent game to sit there and play, and I'm sure you would agree with that.
Yeah, much the same as what we said after the beta. It feels great to play. It runs really smoothly, especially on PC, which we've still got to come later this month.
Yes.
So, yeah, nothing more to add on that, really.
No, and just touch on the presentation side of things. It looks lovely as well. Obviously, the PC version that is coming later this month will be at 60 FPS, so that's going to be an absolute treat for those on that platform. But if you are playing on consoles, I think, again, safe to say, looks stunning.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the biggest complaints of OG vanilla Destiny was the lack of story and the weak narrative that was presented within the game. Now, I felt like they were on the path to addressing that issue with the Taken King and the Rise of Iron. Did Bungie continue this step forward with Destiny 2 and improve the story elements that are there within the game?
I would say overall, yes. It had a really strong story arc. The sort of main plot line was quite engaging. I felt like Rise of Iron, the last expansion of Destiny 1, they did well to tell a story, but the story they told was a bit of a weird one to get behind. It was like a self-replicating nanotechnology, and it was a bit of a strange enemy to face. Whereas in this one, it's a little more straightforward. There's a big bad guy. He wants to take the Traveller from you, and he's going to destroy the solar system if you don't let it. So it's a much simpler story, a bigger sort of apocalyptic event about to happen, and you're the guy who's got to stop it from occurring. So I thought that was a much better story arc than the previous attempts, and fairly well delivered throughout, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, they actually had decent cutscenes that explained what was going on properly. So that helps.
What I also really liked was, unlike in the other, maybe the Taken King excluded, but in the other Destiny expansions or DLCs, there wasn't just this one antagonist, this one bad guy that you were up against. And even in the Taken King, there was one, but you didn't know a lot about him. You didn't really get to hear from Oryx a whole lot. Whereas in this one, they had cutscenes throughout the campaign showing you what he was up to.
Yes.
And actually made him quite interesting, because he starts out being this sort of large armoured head of a legion, sort of bad guy intent on taking the Traveller and the light from us. But as the cutscenes progress, you sort of see that he's a bit more complex than that. He's trying to actually earn it rather than just take it, and he doesn't really want to use brute force.
Absolutely,
he actually wants to see what he can do to be worthy of the light.
Yes.
Which I thought was quite a nice, interesting little dynamic they added through those cutscenes.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, actually. He's not, the typical kind of meathead you expect in the opening kind of sections of the game. They do a good job of developing him, albeit they are very kind of siloed off cutscenes in amongst themselves, but they show a lot more depth to the character, which I think helps overall for players driving through. Any complaints? I mean I would say, compared to other stories that I think are good or very good, this doesn't quite reach that level, but it was a marked improvement what they had before.
I think I'd completely agree with that. I think, as I say, although the overall story arc was very good, some bits within that were still quite poorly explained. So there's definitely improvements that could be made. But as you say, a hell of a lot better than anything Bungie have tried in the previous Destiny title.
Yeah, absolutely. It's inside the Destiny bubble. It's good, but obviously if you go outside of that into the wider gaming area, you find much better coherent stories in first-person shooters. Although you could argue that this is not directly aimed at a single-player market. You've got Wolfenstein 2 coming out later this month, and I expect that to have a very strong story because that's the aim of it. Whereas this, obviously, the focus is more on the post-game stuff and the cooperative stuff, which we'll come on to now. Once you've gone through the campaign at about 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 hours, depending on your character level and how quickly you get up, what will you be treated to a decent post-game content, or is this a bit of a disappointment for you?
Well, I think initially, there's plenty to do. So there's lots to do during the campaign and after the campaign. They put in these, they're probably frustrating if you're trying to power through it, but they put in these breaks in the story where you now need to level up a couple of times before you can carry on with the campaign. Yeah. So there's stuff to do while you're playing the campaign that you sort of have to go off on little side missions and whatnot. And that continues once the campaign's done. There's these adventures that act as side missions. Yeah. Patrols, which anyone who's played Destiny 1 will be familiar with, just tiny little objectives, kill 20 of these, go and collect 10 of those, that kind of thing. Public events, again, another thing from Destiny 1 they've carried over, but they've given in like a new lease of life by adding optional heroic modifiers that make them a bit harder, but grant you better rewards. Yeah, well, you can actually find them as well. Yeah, you can plan them and find them because they're on the map. I remember before it was, there's a bloody third-party site like to use. Yeah, you have to go to some website and check when the drop is occurring, and then you get there and it hasn't happened, so you've wasted 10 minutes waiting around for it. Yes, they've added that to the map. That's a great point. I hadn't thought of that. They've sort of made them a bit more accessible in that way. Yes. And because of these heroic modifiers, you tend to get more players gathering around to do them. That's it. Whereas previously, it was like you tend to just do it on your own and then get very little for it. So they've added that. And they've added flashpoints, which is like a way of grouping players together from week to week. So they make one particular zone the flashpoint for that week, and it has, more enemies appearing on it. The rewards or the public events give you a weekly reward that you can claim that gives you a nice character boost. Yeah. And that just ensures that even some of the worse areas, in terms of the worst environments, they still get some use. They get a population. So you're constantly sort of moving around the environments they've created, which is great. So that all plays into this new milestone weekly kind of checklist almost, doesn't it? Yep. Where you're given several milestones to complete from Tuesday to Tuesday, and once you're past a certain level, that's pretty much the exclusive way to be leveling up your power level. Yeah, there's sort of 4 or 5 of those. A couple of other things we've just mentioned, but you've got Crucible in there as well, so you've got to just play some Crucible. Disappointingly, the Crucible's been split into 2 playlists rather than the sort of, you don't really have the full choice about what you're going to play. It's either competitive or quick play. You can't say, well, I want to play Team Deathmatch or I want to play Control, like the sort of domination style mode. You have to just pick a playlist and go with it. So that's a slight disappointment, I guess, with the Crucible. I think I'd prefer it if they made either split those different game modes up, or maybe made the competitive one the 4v4 mode that's a bit slower, encourages team play, but then made the quick play one the usual 6v6 like we used in Destiny 1, so it's a bit more relaxed. You're a bit more you can play how you want to play rather than necessarily having to stick with the team, because the problem with this 4v4 mode and the slightly increased time to kill is that it really just means that sticking with your teammates is the most rewarding way to play. You don't get in many one-on-ones. No. So find a little area to camp out in and just hope they come in the corner. You're either ganging up on someone or they're ganging up on you. That seems to be the way it plays. And with the introduction of clans into this title, there's a lot of clans in there who are sort of going around as a foursome and ganging up on solo players. So that's a bit of a disappointment in the Crucible in some regards, but I do quite like some of the changes they've made, especially to power ammo and things like that, which we discussed in the beta review. Mm-hmm. And then one of the other milestones, just to touch on the final one of those, is the Nightfall, which you have a milestone to complete it once a week, and they've added some timers and things, new modifiers to make it a bit different to Destiny 1. I quite like that. I think maybe after a couple of months the timer aspect of it could get a bit old, but it has added some urgency to it. There tends to be either kill more enemies to get more time to complete it, or complete these objectives to get more time to complete it. Or as it was this week, as you well know because we did it many times, it's just a straight rush to the end to try and kill the boss as quickly as you can. I think that variation from week to week's been quite interesting. I think it's
it's a decent way of doing things, and they're not unrealistic, targets either. They are tough.
They seem to be pitched at quite a good level. They're difficult enough to be a real challenge, but not so easy you can just walk it.
No, yeah, and I think that's good for the Nightfalls. But what it does do to me is, and I think you may have experienced this as well, and I think many other players, as they're in this kind of odd stage when they're not quite 265 and before, the actual normal raids, the normal strikes, I found very little use for.
Yeah, it's a shame because actually some of the strikes are really quite good.
Yeah.
The one that was the Nightfall this week, I quite enjoy as a strike. It was, got a bit bored of it towards the end of the week because of the number of times we'd run it. But as a strike on its own, it's got quite a nice environment. It's got some quite interesting mechanics in it with those gates that you have to duck under and jump over and that kind of thing. But yeah, as you say, you're looking at 20 minutes maybe to do a strike. You could have done 3 or 4 public events in that time and probably got better rewards for doing so. And again, sort of another complaint about the way they've siphoned these things down to playlists, just like they did with the Crucible, is there's just one strike playlist. You can't pick a strike and play it.
No.
You have to pick the playlist and hope you get the one you want, or you probably won't, to be honest, because it's a completely random strike that it gives you. So there's no control in that sense to play something you enjoy. As you say, other than doing those 2 strikes to unlock Nightfall, I don't think I've really done any at all.
No, it's annoying because I'm sure I've not done at least 2 of the strikes, but because the playlist hasn't been kind, and it's probably if I look at just power leveling, it's a waste of time unless it's the Nightfall. I haven't been bothering. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's where we stand. If you were to look at this as as Bungie, what happened with Destiny 1, obviously very successful, critically suffered a little bit, got better as time went on. Do you feel like they've made a deliberate shift to cater for a different audience, or perhaps cut a few things out for someone like you who's put hundreds and hundreds of hours into Destiny 1, where that kind of longevity might not be there anymore, but for someone a little bit more, and we use the word casual, doesn't mean they're casual. I've done 50 hours, I consider myself casual because I do a few hours a week, but someone like me who may jump on once or twice a week, it's a lot more rewarding for me than it is for a hard-nosed veteran like yourself.
Yeah, and I don't really like the term casual either, because it's sort of used in a bit of an elitist view, like these sort of casual guys coming along ruining our game. It's not that at all, but yeah, it's used to describe sort of the kind of player who maybe plays a couple of times a week and is going to be put off by any kind of long grind. And I guess that's probably the kind of player Destiny 2 in its current state is aimed at. That doesn't make it a bad game. It probably makes it a better game critically. It's a shame for someone who has put in a lot of hours like me, because I'm just still a bit concerned about whether this has got the legs to last as long as Destiny 1 did. And I know, Reddit's the sort of top 1% of, not the top 1%, but it is 1% of the player base. It's a minority in there, but if you look at Reddit, there's a lot of people who feel the same. Especially a lot of streamers, people who've sort of made Destiny 1 part of their life, even part of their routine. They're struggling now to think of things to do. They've got one raid. They don't really have the variation in activities. They don't have the variation in loot to go after. So there's a real concern on that front that it's a little bit, or it will become a little bit empty. Right now, I think it's still great fun, and probably after we've talked, I'll fire up my PlayStation and have another go. I'm still really enjoying it, but I'm getting towards, I think, the point where I'm going to start running out of things to do other than this raid, of which there is only one, and we've got 2 months at least 2 months probably, before we see any new content.
Yes, I know you haven't completed the raid. I know you have played it though and experienced parts of it. What's your kind of initial thoughts on that? I mean, I know you don't hang your hat on the quality of the raid, but it does help if it's going to be a decent adventure for you and 5 others to go through.
Well, what I like about it so far, I haven't completed it. I've only done 2 encounters, I think. What I like about it is it's a refreshing environment compared to the other raids, because I was in the first game we had 2 hive-based raids, and a Vex one and a Fallen one. This is now the Cabal, so it's quite nice new environments, different enemy types to face in a raid setting. And this one, I don't want to give too much away, but it seems to just have one boss. The other encounters are just sort of more mechanic based, which is a nice change. It does mean you can't really, or we've found so far, you can't really have one player who's not pulling their weight. Everyone's really involved in making these mechanics work.
Paper out then.
We'll get through it. It'll be fine. He's a good lad. We can teach him the ways. But it does mean that it's sort of a bit more about explaining and learning these mechanics rather than just having the right weapons and being able to deal enough damage to take down a boss. Mm-hmm. I'll probably, once I've got through the whole thing, write up a bit more about what I think about it and then pop that up so people can read about that. But I can't talk too much about the whole thing because I've not really got more than halfway through.
No, that's totally fine. Well, final thoughts then before we go into the official grading part of it. How 4 weeks in? It's been 4 weeks, give or take a day or two, since the game arrived. What's your thoughts on Destiny 2? Good, bad, indifferent?
Very good. I do have complaints.
Yes.
The main one, which is one I raised when we played the beta, is just this lack of random weapon perks.
Yeah.
And it's still my biggest concern because I thought the only way to mitigate that was to have a huge pool of weapons, so that maybe you don't have random perks, but you now have 20 different weapon types. Yeah. Not weapon types, but 20 different weapons of your preferred type that you can choose from. And we don't really have that. There's sort of a handful of auto rifles that I'm happy to use.
Yes.
And that's a real shame because basically once I've got the one I want, that's it. I'm done. I don't need to go hunting for any more weapons now.
No.
And that was something that really made Destiny 1 the addictive game that it was. Mm-hmm. And it was something that benefited those that are willing to put the time in, but for people who weren't necessarily bothered by a god roll auto rifle, they'd just get a gun and probably be quite happy with the fact that it's a gun they don't have or something to play with. That same thing applies to armor. There's no vendors that sell you armor. You have to hand in your tokens and cross your fingers that you get the bit of armor you want. Character progression, so once the story's complete, it's been simplified down to now just completing your milestones. So there's, as we talked about, there's 4 or 5 of those a week to do.
Yeah.
You can pretty much smash them all out in an evening.
Yes.
So once you've done that, there's not really a lot to do other than wait till next week or try to do that nightfall with 5 minutes remaining like we've been doing. It's sort of boiled it down to a very almost beatable, completable set of objectives. And that's, for someone who doesn't want to complete the game and wants it to sort of go on for longer, that's probably the crux of my disappointment with Destiny 2 so far. It could be changed. They might do some stuff to maybe make weapon mods a bit more interesting and with that make the customization of weapons a bit more deep. But at the moment, it's a great game to play. I really love it. As I say, I'm probably going to jump on and play some more tonight. But it's got a bit of a void that I'm not sure how they're going to fill.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, I think it's time to do the official grading and whether it gets your seal of approval. So Dave, Destiny 2, should you buy it or bin it?
Well, buy it. Absolutely.
Didn't want to swear.
When all's said and done, it is a great game. I've got complaints, but that's from someone who's put in, you said hundreds, but it's over 1,000 hours in Destiny 1.
I undersold you, sorry.
Yeah, well, just to set the expectations of what I was hoping for from this game. For most people, I'm sure this is a great game. It will give you lots of enjoyment, lots of hours of playtime. I think I'm already over 100 on Destiny 2. I think other people in our clan were around the 50 mark. So there's plenty of content there to play for your 40 or 50 quid.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Definitely buy it. And they're going to keep adding to it. So there's more to come.
So this is the question. As we record this on the 2nd of October, letting people peek behind the curtain there, what's today's rating?
Well, I'd say gold. But as I said, that's based on how much I'm really enjoying it now. In 2 weeks' time, maybe I'll be wishing I'd gone a bit lower. But right now, it's a gold. I'm still really enjoying playing it. There's loads to do.
Yes.
Just have to see what comes next.
Excellent. Well, let's draw our Destiny 2 chat to a close. But there is the review of Destiny 2 gold grading from Sir Dave in his debut as reviewer. So he's setting the bar high early on. What other games? I don't know if you're going to review anything else ever again, but you certainly...
Destiny 3?
Well, maybe in 3 years' time.
Maybe after 3 years.
I wonder how long it will be. Jesus. They said 10 years originally for the first one. They got blown out of the water. They can squeeze another one in, can't they? A numbered one. They'll love all that. Anyway, we'll let everyone go. Thanks for joining me on this one, Mr. Lapper. And,
no worries.
Everyone listening or watching, thanks for your time, and ta-da.